So, Brennan, your film Something Blue is out this Christmas season. How do you feel about that? Finally releasing it, sort of online.
It feels good, It like I'm a little sad by like the whole situation with the festivals and stuff this year, and it not being able to play as many as it was like, able to get into, and the ones that it did play at, just not being able to have that atmosphere where you can talk to people about their movies and then talk about yours and stuff. But yeah, I've been wanting to put it online for a while now so people can see it. So yeah, I'm excited.
So let's talk about the conception of the film, because we had many conversations about this film, probably as much as like 5 years ago, or maybe even more, before you wrote a script or had the intention of like doing it. So tell me about that, about thinking about it for so long.
Yeah, I've talked to you about it before where it's like I feel like the things that I actually end up making end up ruminating in my head for at least like a couple of years before I can finally like truly put pen to paper. I write stuff down and things like that, but as somebody who like shoots weddings and does video and stuff like that, and some experiences that I had kind of doing that for like a while, I kind of had formulated this idea because while it is something I enjoyed, it also felt like really lonely. That it's just everybody's, like you said in the film, everybody's celebrating love and happiness, and you're just there on the sidelines. And especially when it's people that that are there, it can kind of get even more kind of in that kind of depressing mood. And so that was kind of something I would just think about as I was in them. And sooner or later, it just kind of like the dream scenario of like meeting somebody at one of these weddings kind of came to my mind. And it kind of from there, yeah, again, it was just like thinking about it and talking to you about it, and just like until like kind of a fully fleshed out story was kind of in my head. And then that's when I finally put pen to paper and started writing it. And then it was pretty quickly where it was within like several months we had the film shot in the can, and then we went into the editing process and all of that.
So you have a script for this movie you've been thinking about for years, right? Oh, it's a pretty large piece, and the script was 18 or so pages, something like that. How did you sort of now conceive of making this sort of film a reality where there are many weddings, and weddings are expensive in real life? So how did you conceive of doing that for the movie?
Yeah, that was kind of one of the problems early on. It was just like we have to put on, in the script probably at least like 5, 6, 7 weddings, and so it kind of just like I had to just start getting the gears turning in my head as to how we would achieve this. I knew of a place where we'd be able to at least put on one reception, you know what I mean? And so for as little money as we can, we just dressed that place up using resources that we had from other people, and a few things that we were able to acquire ourselves. And we transformed this one venue, which was like kind of a gathering space, into what looked to be, on camera at least, a pretty eloquent wedding reception. And from there, we had a lot of lights that kind of lined the room that shined this blue that you can kind of see in the first scene. Mm-hmm. And so from there, all we did was, as we changed from wedding to wedding, we'd switch out a few props, things that were like color accents that matched the blue, blue flowers and things like that. We switched those out for different colors, and then we just changed all of the lights along those walls to match that kind of color scheme. And when you watch the final film, hopefully you can't even tell that it is the exact same venue in many cases over and over again. That is just a few things were tweaked, and it becomes a whole new place. So I was fairly confident in that going in, but it was still a little nerve-wracking. But even on set, we changed the colors, and we looked around and we're like, it's a whole new place. So
definitely, yeah.
And we did a few other things, a few other tricks, like doing one short scene on a green screen and things like that, just to give it a little bit more variance. But all in all, it was just a lot of visual trickery, which, that's all everything is anyway in film. So yeah.
So then talk to me about the sort of finale venue, this sort of barn structure that is sort of was essential, I think, to you as you were telling me and we were talking about actually making it. So tell me about that location.
Yeah, so that location is actually like a venue that I filmed at one point, and I had a pretty crazy experience there that I probably won't get into here. But yeah, that's kind of where I started to have these feelings about this film and stuff in the first place. So we ended up. I ended up calling them, and they totally obliged and let us go in there and use the space, set up our lights and everything like that. They had most of the stuff that was already there. Is what I wanted there to be anyway, like the twinkling lights and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, we just took all of our stuff, put some blue accents, kind of moved things around where we wanted decorated. And yeah, it kind of became almost exactly what I pictured in my head, which happened with a lot of this film. Like, a lot of the film was almost exactly what I had imagined and intended for, which, that doesn't always happen. So it was pretty good experience being able to see that when it was finished. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Yeah, that was a cool space though, and it was amazing we got to be there all day, pretty much, or a good amount of the day. We got to get there, set up, take a break, whatever, from filming everything previous in that day, and then. But I remember we had a lot of problems with the light because obviously the the reception is that night, as most receptions are. And but this is a barn, and there was a bunch of light like coming through the slats of the walls. Tell me about sort of lighting that place and with all that.
Yeah, it ended up being that we couldn't be there as late as we wanted because some actors had to leave, which kind of stunk. But then it turned out the weather forecast was kind of doing them a favor anyways, because it was supposed to pour. So we weren't able to shoot there only at night, which is what I initially wanted to do. So we didn't have to deal with, like that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we basically had to shoot some of it, specifically the part at the end when they're dancing. We had to do that day for night, kind of on an interior, because there's a lot of light leaking through. And it was a huge hassle, especially in like a very emotionally intense scene.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have been able to shoot everything all at once, but it ended up being kind of a dance of moving, things that were blocking lights that were motivating, moonlight, things like that. And yeah, but Carly and Marshall were troopers in that, and they nailed the scene anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And even it became a little bit cumbersome in the edit, trying to make sure all like the lighting and stuff was up to snuff from shot to shot, kind of keeping that continuity. But in the end, for what happened, I can't be more happy with it.
Yeah, I remember we had a ridiculous setup of like flags that of just like. There came to a point where we just needed black material, and any black material that was in our radius was like rigged up to light stands and like.
Yeah, we basically had a massive like 15 by 15 like flag, I guess you'd say, blocking like the entire broad side of the barn that had tons of light coming in through it, and it's pretty like I don't think anybody would know if they saw it. So
yeah. So you mentioned Carly and Marshall, of course. So tell me about sort of casting these two people that which main leads, right? So
yeah. So you had mentioned Carly because of something that you had been working on, and I think it was a film, Artificial Insomniacs or something.
Yeah, it didn't work out.
Yeah, sadly never saw the light of day, but you had mentioned that you had found this girl that you would have liked to have cast, and when I saw a picture of her, I was like, oh, like that's a good person to like keep in the brain, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. File it away just in case one day. And then I found myself as I was writing the film and writing this character, I think on the log line it says something like short blonde hair and stuff like that. I kind of realized that I was writing Carly as this character, even though I had never spoken to her or anything. I didn't know her as like a character in real life, you know what I mean? But I just had this feeling that like something would work there. So yeah, I ended up approaching her, and she loved the idea, and she came out and was a trooper on that. And Marshall, he was a little bit more difficult to find. We could not find somebody up to like maybe the final week. And I ended up getting in touch with Marshall again through you and some other people that are part of 640. And yeah, he ended up working really, really well for it. He did an audition. I just did it based on trust, and he absolutely delivered. Mm-hmm. Both of them were incredible, like at just knowing exactly what was on camera and what would look best on camera, down to the point where like when their hands are in the shot and they're handing off the camera, and like Carly reaches out her hand to like take his hand to ask him to dance. They just knew exactly like not to have the hand just fly out, but like have it roll out and things like that. And I was just constantly like amazed at how much I didn't need to tell them, what to do, because they knew what looked good on camera.
So what was your process of approaching them with sort of getting them into these characters where they're sort of stepping on set and you're sort of meeting them in person for the first time? How did you work through these very, which become quite emotional characters? Like, how do you work with them with that?
I talked a lot to Marshall about like how I felt, and like when I was doing that kind of when I was shooting weddings and things, and how it felt like somewhat of a sad affair, you know what I mean, and you just really don't have any kind of like point of reference to talk to these people, because as far as a lot of them are concerned, you're there for them, you're the help, which you are in a certain sense, but again, it's like at a wedding, that's not how most people feel when you go to a wedding. It's this fun event where you're going and you're talking and people meeting and all this stuff, and to be on the outskirts of that. As far as Carly goes, it was kind of talking to her about in a sense, she's kind of this like dream girl in this thing, where it's like she appears and she meets him and things are wonderful, but I wanted this certain bluntness to her that was like, in real life, nobody's like this manic pixie dream girl, you know what I mean? So like there's always this real nature to them, and that's what I wanted her to capture, and she did a really good job, and we definitely worked to like whittle it and hone in that kind of performance to make it very very shocking in more ways than one. One way where she's coming in here and she's like this girl of your dreams that walks in the door, but at the same time it's also coming at a different angle, and it's shocking of how kind of in some ways mean and like kind of just very raw in how she approaches David, in kind of a no bullshit way.
Yeah, because you mentioned the film earlier as a sort of fantasy of your own, of being bored, depressed at shooting a wedding, and I think that works well to sort of take the film as a fantasy, but then also like sort of deconstruct the fantasy at the same time, which I think it sort of does well in the end of the film.
Yeah.
What about directing those sort of intimate scene, like the dancing you were talking about, and like the sort of, for lack of a better way, breakup scene? How did you approach them with the sort of complicated emotions of those scenes, where there's obviously a betrayal that happens, but there's a sort of, it's more complex than that in a way?
Yeah, the breakup scene was interesting because I didn't quite have as much of a plan of how I wanted to shoot that as other scenes. And we did a lot of it in profile, which I thought was cool because it kind of like conceals half their face, concealing kind of like half of what is being told to us as an audience and Marshall as a character. And so talking to them about, obviously Carly and her character kind of continues this bluntness and kind of like this bluntness and this kind of raw character that isn't afraid to tell you how she feels. And but in this case, she is afraid to tell him how she feels. You know what I mean? She's telling a lie. So she needs to do it in a way that is like still to her character and not showing too much of herself, especially at the beginning of it. And then we kind of deconstruct that as the scene goes on, and Marshall kind of breaks her because she does have a soft spot in her heart for him. And then that's when we cut to close-ups on them in a more full capacity, because, and then that's when we kind of get a little bit more inkling as to what's going on, but she only does it for a moment before she leaves. I didn't want it to be like this tale of like, oh, don't, like infidelity is wrong and like you shouldn't cheat, you know what I mean? I wanted it to almost be more about Carly in a certain sense, and the way that she kind of has this character that was going to have this huge change in her life. And obviously she was very comfortable in where she was originally, where she would go out and go to these parties, these weddings and things like that, and just like have a great time, live for herself, live for, nobody but her, you know what I mean? But kind of that transition period, and like how does somebody struggle with that, almost like kind of like a quarter life crisis kind of thing, and how do you deal with that? And there's this reconciliation at the end where Marshall understands that that she went through that, and Carly understands that what she had done was, you know, it hurt him and it could have hurt more people. And so that's kind of the motivation I had for them going into that dance. And I know Marshall was very helped by music. I sent him this final song that would be at the end of the film. And so he listened to that as well as some other stuff to kind of get him into that emotional state. And Carly, you know, I don't know quite what Carly did, but she did a wonderful job. And between takes, when we were moving those lights and things like that, I look over and I'd see them just like kind of getting into that space mentally. And it was kind of the first time I was able to see two people work off of each other so well. And as far as those go, you know, I did a lot of just shooting around them in those moments, those dance sequences. It was all kind of a little bit improvised. I had ideas of where I wanted the camera to be, but I understood that me getting this one shot and this other shot, the times between there as I'm moving there, you know what I mean? Those were also going to be equally as important in the edit, and like wanting this thing to seem kind of like that we're just like following them as they're going. And I didn't want to hope that they'd be in the perfect spot right when I did something. I wanted to make sure I kind of had as much of it as I could, because you never know when something magical is going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. So tell me about like the music of the film, because it's very much, you know, structured around music, you know, very, I mean, from the beginning, or close to the beginning, you know, structured around music. Tell me about finding those songs and how they'll work in, and sort of, especially with that montage sequence, about, you know, shooting these with this song in mind, then cutting it to that song, like how that all sort of morphs and changes for you.
Yeah, I tend to gravitate towards music just because, you know, I just feel such things when I'm listening to songs, and it just, from as long as I can remember, I see images to them. I don't necessarily love music videos. I like things to be able to, like, you know, filling up an entire song isn't something that I like strive to do, you know what I mean? I use the parts of the song that I think are necessary for the piece to kind of get what needs to be said on there. And it wasn't a right away thing, you know. Obviously I had the songs picked out before we started filming, but, you know, originally I thought maybe when Carly and Marshall are going through the relationship into this montage, I kind of wanted it to maybe be a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more, you know, jazzy. But, you know, as you look for stuff, you find something eventually that clicks and you're like, this is it. And Stay by Noah Benter, it was perfect for that moment. And just like the kind of just no matter how happy things were on screen and how happy you felt as an audience member, it was just like you still felt this like element of melancholy that was like, you didn't think that something bad was going to happen. But yeah, it's hard to explain. When I watch it, I know something is there, even if I'm not consciously thinking about it. As far as the song at the end, which was Grace by Dawn Chorus by Raccoon, that was another one that just like, it just fit with exactly how I wanted the ending to be, like beat for beat. You know, you come across something like that every now and again where it's like, yeah, it's like, it's almost like, yeah, it's like this should have been playing in the background. And I like to mess around with like the diegesis of these music things and stuff like that. And yeah, I personally think, for me, I love movies to be like musicals, even if they're not musicals. And that doesn't necessarily mean there has to be music throughout it. I think the breakup scene is a perfect example of like almost a musical, in the way that just like the fireworks and the things like that kind of like are happening and making beats throughout it. You know, I like things to be heightened in a way that it feels slightly magical in everything that I kind of do. Even the most like serious moments, I think, can be heightened by just like having things that don't happen in real life, but like we understand the feeling behind what's happening, and so that we relate to it anyway, even if you know, fireworks don't shoot off right at the height of a breakup scene and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It gives you the feeling of it.
Yeah, definitely. With the fireworks, I watched this interview with David Fincher's gaffer at one point, and he said that when Fincher goes to post production, he's making a whole different movie. And I feel like you're the same way in a lot of ways. Of you go in and you don't really look at it as what you shot in a way. It's almost like, what can I do now? You know, it's like a whole other process with VFX and color. So tell me about like finding that other side of the film through all of this, you know, all the sort of magic you can do with post production and VFX and all that.
Yeah, I think Fincher is a huge inspiration to me, as far as like what you just said, the way he treats his films after he's done, you know, just like going into it, making a whole different movie. There's a lot of portions of Something Blue that are very inspired by that. In fact, I think the very first shot in Zodiac, there's the same shot is in there with the fireworks, and that was kind of my first draw of like adding the fireworks in, because the fireworks were initially not part of it at all. The breakup scene was completely devoid of that. It was just shot as was with no sound, just them talking and going through this thing, and it worked fine in the edit, but as I was watching, it just didn't feel what I wanted to feel in that moment. And so I tried different things. I tried making it storm out. I tried having a train passing by the window that kind of like shook the place at certain times, and I eventually landed on fireworks because I just felt like it kind of accentuated the kind of the magical aspect of it, and like these like great grand wedding like things. I've been to a few weddings that shoot off fireworks, are still happening in the background, even though inside things are not going as well. And when I watch it now, it's like that was what I intended the entire time. Not to this, the point where like, oh, I'm tricking all these people into thinking this was my intention. It feels like that was my intention the entire time, which I think that's the sign of it working. And it felt really good to kind of have that come into the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. But the fireworks aren't the only sort of post-production magic. There's like a lot of other things, like the sky, the shooting in downtown Grand Rapids, making that even fit more. Tell me about all those other moments that sort of just like, you know, needed a little bit more, and you could add more because you know how to do that, you know.
Yeah, for me, I just like I'm inspired by movies that are, you know, they're usually a little bit bigger, you know what I mean? Even like the indie kind of movies that I like, that are a little bit smaller, that are maybe a little bit more relatable to things that you and I can make. They still have, you know, $1 million, $2 million, and then, you know, going off from there, you know, 15 million, 30 million, and, you know, obviously you have nothing. The whole film was made for under $800, and so for me, I realized a long time ago that being able to like make manipulations in post with like visual effects and things like that, just from color to just like being able to replace a sky, that is what, you know, that's the only way that I can do those things right now, without spending a ton of money. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like Madcap Coffee downtown in Grand Rapids. They have a green building. Now, you know, if I had $30 million budget, you know, we might have people come in, paint that whole thing blue, and then we'd shoot there. I don't have that at all, but it's so easy. It takes 10 minutes to just eyedropper that, change it blue. You know what I mean? It takes when you only have your actors for a weekend because everybody else is busy with school, work, and everything. Not everybody can be as committed to it as like an actor who's getting paid $7 million. You know. We could wait for the perfect time at sunset. We could wait for a storm to come to shoot all those wides outside of Madcap. But no, we can just replace the sky easier later and hone in exactly what we want. Same with some of the weddings and things like that. You know, the photo booth was totally fake because I can't spend $500 to rent a photo booth for one shot. You know what I mean? So, you know, put up the best thing we can, throw a simple object in there, and it just, you know, it's like using it as a paintbrush. You know what I mean? I'm not having crazy explosions and action things. You know, I'm not, you know, against that kind of thing. But I've always just used it as a tool. It's time over money in a certain sense. You know what I mean? Like I don't have the money to do stuff, so I'll spend time and effort in post-production to try to hone in those things that I just wasn't able to get because you know, we can't get money to make our films yet.
Yeah. Well, Something Blue coming to a screen near you
Yes.
this holiday season. So look out for that. And thank you, Brennan, for taking some time out of your busy life to do this interview.
Thank you, Parker. Yeah, let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, okay.